You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. Joining us now, Stephen K. Bannon. Steve, good morning. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me, John.
Okay, got to make a couple intros. Number one, was it 60 days ago, right? October 15th, Steve gets on my show, calls in from somewhere, and he says, well, you know, John, President Trump is going to get impeached on 2 counts of impeachment before Christmas. And we were like, the hell are you talking about? It's fake news. It's a witch hunt. There can be no impeachment. That's like ridiculous. So I call him after that, and he's like, dude, you don't get what's going on here. That was number one. Number two, Steve said that Nancy Pelosi is a master political strategist. All this has played out since he started. That's why you've got to tune into Stephen K. Bannon's War Room Impeachment every day, 7 days a week, 9 to 10 a.m. on Mondays. Vox Populi, Voice of the People, call in 10 to noon. I'll be doing that on Monday, so you don't want to forget that. Anyway, Steve, your thoughts on the impeachment yesterday, 230 votes on one, 229 on the other. And then Pelosi turns around and says, well, I might not give it to the Senate. What the hell's going on?
Well, look, the most important thing, I think, particularly for Trump supporters to come to grips with today is elections have consequences. You know, I made this film, Trump at War, John, and I was on your show a number of times in the summer of 2018. And I went around the country. I was on Sean Hannity all the time. I was on Fox. I said, and they made a film called The Brink, but not a particularly empathetic filmmaker who followed me around the world, but particularly around the 30 congressional districts that were really at play. And I said, I started every speech with the same thing. I said, look, if we lose the House, which they're very focused on, and they're doing the work that the Tea Party did in 2010, their first order of business is going to be, in fact, their only order of business is going to be impeach Donald Trump. And that's what happened. That's why you lost, Virginia 2. That's why you lost Virginia 7. You had a couple of, very solid congressmen. You had Taylor down in the Norfolk Tidewater area, and you have Dave Bratt, obviously the guy that took out Eric Cantor. And so I think the first thing, besides all the moaning and everything that's going on, focus on what is important. There's a French socialist Catholic infantry officer, was a poet named T.G., who said The most important thing we do is not to report what we see, but to see what we see. We have to face reality. And this is so shocking. It's the reason I did War Room Impeachment. It's so shocking when I called into your show on October 15th and to realize that not just people like you, but the deplorables out there, we're essentially living in fantasy land. Mm-hmm. And if you want to take your country back, if we want to drive this country in the direction that President Trump has been able to lead us, we have to have a real soul-searching and a real focus. This is going to be grinded out from now to Election Day in 2020, and it's absolutely imperative not simply to make sure that President Trump's reelected and that we hold the Senate, but we have to take back the House of Representatives. Remember, the framers, set up our structure of government to give really incredible amount of power to the House of Representatives because that's the people's house. The appropriations bill, the ability really to investigate, and it's got tremendous power. You saw that last night. Donald Trump was impeached last night, not about the Ukraine. It was about raw political power. Mm-hmm. And that's because we held the House of Representatives, and we lost things like Virginia 2 and Virginia 7. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be, I think people got to get very focused. Here's the reason we lost. And I kept hearing this all the time, well, President Trump's not on the ticket, people are happy. Well, you know what? That's not good enough. Mm-hmm. It's not good enough. President Trump's always on the ticket. He was on the ticket. It was a referendum on him. Mm-hmm. Simply for the fact that he wasn't on the ballot doesn't mean he's not on the ticket, okay? And we lost this. And last night, and I'm telling you, and I keep saying this, I was over at Fox last night to do the Trish Reagan show, but the president's speaking, so I'm going to be in studio tonight with Trish for the entire hour in Washington, D.C. to talk about developments and going forward. Mm-hmm. Somebody asked me, and I said, look, I think because of War Room Impeachment and what John Fredericks has been able to let us work, and now it's nationwide on Salem. It's picked up on Newsmax. It's on America's Voice. This thing is global. We've got people all over the world picking it up. The one thing I tell people is what Samuel Goldwyn said about the movie business. Nobody knows nothing. You don't know. I think I've got as good a feel for this as anybody out there, okay? And I tell people, I do not know how this is going to play out day to day. And last night was a perfect example. Nancy Pelosi has thought this through. You may hate her. on when she's on TV, you may get, your neck may start getting red because you get angry, but she's played this thing. She started 85 days ago. And when she went up to that, when she stepped on President Trump's fantastic speech to the United Nations, when he really gave the best defense of nationalism and the best defense of the Westphalian system that I've heard and ever been given in the United Nations General Assembly, a really stunning speech, one of the best speeches of his presidency. And she bigfooted that speech that afternoon at 4 or 5 o'clock when she went to the microphone and said they were starting an impeachment inquiry. Mm-hmm. That's when I was telling people, okay, it's going to happen. Between Thanksgiving and Christmas, she's going to deliver a couple of articles of impeachment, and it's game on. So this is as serious as it gets. People that dismiss this, it's going to be quit in the Senate, do not know what they're talking about. Okay, if you're a President Trump supporter, now's the time to come to sites like the John Fredericks site. Now's the time to get back up on Facebook. Now's the time to get your neighbors talking, because the 2020 election obviously started that day that she stood up there, and we're in it now, and we have to win this, because everything that we've tried to do, except for the courts, they'll try to undo. And so, the Trump revolution is only in its very early stages, and this impeachment is only in its early stages. She has, we don't know what she intends to do in holding this back, but we do know that she's just not going to walk over to the Senate and give this. One of the things I've been telling people is this is the first time there's been an impeachment when there's been separation in the House and the Senate. In 1868, the radical Republicans at the time, in fact, the most radical parts of the Republican Party controlled the House and the Senate after the Civil War. And that led to the impeachment of Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson, as you know, tried to not, I think, enforce some laws about Reconstruction and was impeached. In Clinton, the House members immediately walked over. I think that evening walked over to the Senate and gave them the articles of impeachment. That's not going to happen here. Mm-hmm. Nancy Pelosi is going to become part of the negotiation for what happens in the Senate. So for all the Trump followers out there, it's time to hunker down, because this is going to be all the way till next November. Every day is going to be a fight.
Well, you were right back on October 15th when you kind of shocked us for what you said, and then you kept saying.
Well, you shouldn't have been. This is the point.
Well, we were shocked because we were fed shocked. we were fed fake news.
You know what? It's not good enough. It's just not. You're too smart. You're too good. You were the only guy up there on Radio Row with us that night, and quite frankly, your audience is too good. Mm-hmm. Right? Your audience is too good. The reason that the deplorables are so important, the reason when we get the calls from your show on the War Room Impeachment, the people are so up to speed. Mm-hmm. You can't take what you're being fed. You have to think it through, mm-hmm. because the entire direction of the country depends upon us, right? Remember, back in the summer and the fall of 2018, I kept hearing that the deplorables were not fired up because, mm-hmm. Everything was going so well. Mm-hmm. And like I said back at CPAC in 17, they're just not going to sit there, because you win one election doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean anything. They're not going to pat you on the head and say, oh, you're terrific. What a great idea. Let's have John Frederick and his followers on radio just take the country and take it in the direction they want. That's not how the system works. Mm-hmm. You have to, if you're interested in taking your country back, if you're interested in seeing the policies and programs of populism and nationalism and what President Trump has led us in, you have to understand you're going to have to fight every day. And if people say, hey, well, I'm too busy, I got this to do, I got that to do, and I can vote or something like that, then guess what? We're not going to win. The 18 election, and nobody wants to talk about this. We won by 79,000 votes or 77,000 votes in 5 counties in 3 states. Okay, mm-hmm. And it was a miraculous win. What President Trump did and the Trump campaign and all the supporters and people in the audience did was incredible. It was very mm-hmm. providential. Mm-hmm. But we lost the House of Representatives when we grossed it up on a national basis, 52 to 46, mm-hmm. by 8.5 million votes. And people say, "Oh, Steve, you're counting California, New York." Okay, hey, maybe I am, but we lost. Mm-hmm. And I told people at the time, and it's over and over and over again. She was running on impeachment. Now, she didn't say that in Virginia 2 and Virginia 7 because these kind of hand-picked candidates with Michael Bloomberg's $100 million in back of them, okay, were told never to talk about impeachment, talk about health care, talk about the economy, talk about national security. So you had mm-hmm. CIA agents, you had military combat veterans, and you had law enforcement people and all these kind of curated, people. But In the more liberal districts, that's all they were talking about. What motivated those people in the summer of 18 is they understand something the Republican establishment refuses to believe, that Donald Trump's a transformative president and a historic figure. And they will do anything, including weaponizing impeachment, to drive him from office, but also to stop in its tracks what he represents. And if you believe in what he represents and you believe in him as president, you've got to get serious, and we have to. And if we don't get serious, we're going to lose. If we get serious, we win. If we get serious, absolutely we're going to win, because we have the numbers on our side, we have the right policies on our side, the country's going in a fantastic direction now because of President Trump, but it's about his followers, and it's about putting your shoulder to the wheel and not just writing a check to the campaign. It's about getting engaged in social media. It's about getting engaged with your family. It's about getting engaged in these grassroots groups, about listening to John Fredericks and these other shows, and just getting engaged and putting some of your selfhood into the reelection of President Trump, and as importantly, taking back the House of Representatives.
So what you're saying, Steve, really is this impeachment and what is going on right now transcends Donald J. Trump as president. This is really an affront, an assault, an offensive to stop the America First policies movement in its tracks. That's really what you're saying here is the big picture.
Here's one thing. Remember, they hate him at such a level that it's incomprehensible. They detest President Trump personally. They detest his style, and they detest him. But here's the reason they detest him so deeply, is that he represents something new and unique in American political history, and he's able to, you saw the rally last night, he's able to connect to working-class people and middle-class people in a way that they can't. And that's why they hate him, because he is an existential threat to the existing order, and he's a particularly existential threat to this radicalized Democratic Party and their media overlords. I said from day one, the opposition party media is far stronger than the Democratic Party, and it is. The opposition party media, coupled with the money from people like Michael Bloomberg and Tom Steyer and George Soros, these other hedge fund guys or billionaires that have put this money into these other outside groups, because the Democratic Party is not particularly good at doing this, that have formed this grassroots network that's quite powerful, okay? They've been very good, and they're trying to blunt Donald Trump. They realize Donald Trump connects to a working class and a middle-class audience, and they understand if that continues on, that's the death knell for them. And so they will do anything to drive him from office and blunt it, but it's even deeper than President Trump. It's what President Trump represents, which is really working class and the deplorables. It's about giving the – before President Trump came along, and this is the problem with the Republican Party, the deplorables, not in the room, not in the deal, and you never had a voice. With Donald Trump, not only you have a voice in the room, you are the room. And that's what's driving them crazy, and that's what you saw last night. And people should just put all the happy talk aside, everything aside, and get focused on what's important. Here's what's important: victory. Nothing else matters. We have to win. If you don't win, you're going to have more nights like last night, more mornings like today. So we have to win. And winning is reelecting President Trump, holding the Senate, but also to take back the House of Representatives. Don't think they won't try to impeach him again. Don't think they won't try to stop every policy he's got, from building the wall to America First national security policy to his economic policies. Don't think they'll try to blunt any of those. So, look, we've got a long, tough struggle ahead of us. And also don't take this all happy talk that, hey, he's going to get totally acquitted. It's going to be the price of acquittal. And he doesn't need acquittal. He needs exoneration.
That's why you're for. That's why
I'm adamant about this. He should
a trial.
Full trial in the Senate. Full trial. I think he should have full trial in the Senate. Let's get the facts on the table. President Trump told us substance and unity, substance and unity. What I'm most proud about the show and your help and other people, outside groups that campaigned the RNC, when we first started on October 15th, I think 80% or 85% of Republican elected officials said, well, what he did was not right, but it's not impeachable. And President Trump said the exact opposite. What I did is a perfect call. All the pattern and stuff around there was exactly what I was supposed to do. This is why the American people hired me. Yesterday, you saw in those speeches, not one person in the House said that what he did was not perfect, that they backed him 100%. That is the sea change from October 15th.
Right. And
now he's going to the Senate, and President Trump needs to be exonerated. And I think President Trump's going to demand he's exonerated. I think President Trump is going to see this media and how they're piling on, and they're writing his political obituary. And President Trump understands he's at the top of the first inning. So there's a wide spread between the bid and the ask here. And I think President Trump is going to think about it over the next couple of days and say, hey, I don't want some quick and dirty acquittal, which they're always going to say the jury was rigged. Lindsey Graham already says it's rigged. McConnell says it's rigged. I want a full-on trial. I want the nation and the world and the American people to see this. The facts are on my side. Substance and granularity. Help me, and we're going to win here.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth Across America. We're with Stephen K. Bannon. Stephen, also the host of the radio show War Room Impeachment. He's on across our network 7 days a week, 9 to 10 a.m. On Monday, Vox Populi. That is voice of the people. He takes your calls 10 to noon. Steve, I'm going to try to fit an hour in today from 10 to 11 a.m. I got to move some things, but it's imperative now, Steve. It's imperative that we get the deplorables to call in. We get their engagement based on what you just said.
I'm on this 24/7.
And I got to figure this out. We just internally have to figure it out. All right, I'm going to get to a few questions, Stephen K. Bannon. Rich from Norfolk, Virginia says, okay, so Pelosi is not giving the articles of impeachment to the Senate. Is Mitch McConnell going to cave? How can we have a trial if it doesn't get there? What say you?
Well, I think it is going to get there. I think what she's doing is she's holding her cards. She's going to figure out what they want is him to be found. Listen, they want his removal from office. They understand that there are long odds against that. But if they don't get his removal from office, they want to use this as a predicate to get him removed in November. That's what this is all about. It's not about the Ukraine. It has nothing to do with any of that. That's just an excuse to get to this point. She wants his removal from office, and she's a tough negotiator. She and Mitch McConnell, the president, are three masters at this game, and now you're about to see it. By the way, if you just like politics, if you want to teach your kids a civics lesson, make sure they dial in, make sure they tune in for this, because we're about to see it. This is a unique moment in American history. I keep saying they're going to be talking about this 100 years from now, and so now Nancy Pelosi is going to figure out how she can intrude into the trial to try to get obviously the worst outcome for President Trump, and we'll have to see how this plays out. But I just don't think Mitch McConnell and these guys. And this is going to be a clash between the House and the Senate. The Senate is like the House of Lords. The House is like the House of Commons. And as you know, John, the Senate doesn't have a lot to do with the House. They don't think much of them.
Right.
They think it's it's beneath them. They have this decorum. It's supposedly the most exclusive club in the world, the most deliberative body. So we're going to see, but stay tuned. It's pretty obvious that she's going to use every trick up her sleeve and every advantage she has to try to make sure that the trial for President Trump is as absolutely tough and as unfair as possible, right? And so this is what I'm also saying. I don't want people sitting there going, oh, she's so unfair. Hey, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. And we have to understand that this is power politics, and she's a power player, and she doesn't like Trump, and she likes your audience less. And that's where we're going to have to just, hunker down here and figure out how to support the president. One of the ways to support the president is light the phone lines up on Virginia 2 and Virginia 7.
That's right.
And let people know that, hey, we did the dirty 30. We went to all the districts and put it all up. A ton of money was put in there to do this, and they all voted. Every one of those, except for Van Drew, who looks like he's going to flip parties, all of the 30 essentially voted for impeachment. And so
were you surprised by that, Steve? Did you think that? I know when there was a couple of times that some of us thought, 8, 10, maybe 12 of them would get permission to vote. Now, were you surprised that every single one of them, except the guy that's switching parties, voted for both these articles?
I thought there were a couple, particularly some of these R+6, R+8.
Yeah.
R+10, districts might be, but they have, she has an iron fist over there, and they essentially told them, she had to whip the vote, but basically said, hey, you're not going to get any money we're going to throw in. It should be an indicator how tough the fight's going to be. They were essentially guaranteeing these people you're going to have the resources and the support to defeat any candidate. So this is going to be the House election is going to be as tough and as gnarly as the presidential election, and it's going to be actually on a bigger battlefield because it'll be stretched all over the country, right? Instead of just into the swing states. So it's, but no, I thought it's impressive. She held. I thought equally impressive is how the Republicans, and this is the unity the president brought. If you had said at the time, I thought it was a much higher probability, particularly the people like Rooney and King that retired right before it started. That's always an indicator. You had 20 people stepping down. You had guys like Hurd all these people. So for the Republicans to have absolute unity, I thought was incredibly impressive. It shows the support the president has, and also shows how the president transformed the Republican Party. And I think that's very impressive. And it's one of the good pieces of news to come out of here is you're united. The people want to fight, and it's going to be a fight.
All right, I just got one more text question, and then we got to roll. John in Yorktown says, "Hey, Steve, can Pelosi hold the articles of impeachment until after the November election?"
I think it's an open question. There's a lot of I heard a couple of scholars last night, but I think it was hot takes. So I don't want to say this is definitive, but people are saying it's kind of ill-defined. And somebody actually said they could hold it into the next presidency. Obviously, that's not going to happen because there'll be tremendous pressure on her. But she's in no hurry, and I think they leave tomorrow, so she's in no hurry to take them over right now. And that means there won't be the planning on the trial until they get back. And my understanding is she does not intend to deliver them until Congress returns on the 7th. And so that's also pushing it. I think the other subtext here is she doesn't really care about the Democratic primary, what's happening, because as you know, these senators are going to have to be jurors. The 5 that are running right now for president, including some of the top contenders. But I think it's also a big indication. I take that as a tell. They know how weak their field is. They don't mind their field being in the witness protection program as the whole nation's galvanized. Nobody cares about the Democratic primary. One is that such a weak field, it's so boring. But as importantly, the biggest political story, and one of the biggest political stories of modern political history, is this whole impeachment process against President Trump. And now it's even going to get more intense. If you think you've seen intensity so far in this is nothing compared to what's going to happen. Now it's going to ratchet up 2 or 3 orders of magnitude, as now this trial is going to have real meaning. And I think it's going to have meaning for twofold. Number one, Nancy Pelosi is going to try to rig it to make it as disadvantageous to President Trump as possible. And I believe President Trump is going to come to the conclusion he wants a trial and he's going to want witnesses. And I think that's going to change the entire dynamic here, because President Trump's going to say, hey, I didn't do anything wrong. I did what the American people elected me to do. I need to be exonerated by the United States Senate, and then I need to be exonerated again or vindicated again in 2020. Exoneration by trial and vindication by the 2020 election.
Stephen K. Bannon, we're out of time. I got to roll. Thank you for being with us. Stephen K. Bannon, thanks. War Room, impeachment coming up at 9 a.m. We're going to try to have a Vox Populi call-in after that. I'm trying to get it worked out. Steve, thank you.